Hey everyone, this is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of Sub That Tutorials and More. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss out on any new videos, and check the video description for a link to the Sub That Learning Library app. Inside of our mobile/web app, you can access all of our free tutorials in a neatly organized content library, as well as choose to upgrade for access to exclusive content and communities to help you grow your business to the business of your dreams. In this tutorial, I am going to be showing you how to sublimate a microfiber sport towel. Now, this is the kind of towel that can be used for really any kind of athletic where there is balls involved, whether that is football, golf, softball, baseball, basically anything where you might need to both wipe up sweat and also scrub off some dirt. So this particular towel is by far the nicest one I have ever found and tried. It's from Johnson's Plastics Plus, and I'm really excited to show you just how big it is and how nice the quality is, and of course how beautifully it presses with your sublimation printer. Let's go ahead and turn things around and I'll show you what we're working with. These are some of the nicest golf towels or sport towels that I've seen, and I've tried quite a few different ones from other suppliers and from Amazon. So these have this really plush microfiber soft side and then have a textured scrubby underside, and of course come with the grommet hook. Now you can do these full bleed or you can just do one big design. It's really kind of your choice. Whenever I think about products like this, I always consider how it's going to be used or hung. So if we envision this hung kind of like this, where it's kind of hanging off, we know that that one side is probably going to flop down and we're going to have most of this visible. So I'm going to aim to do a design that's roughly about that size. Let's go ahead and grab those measurements so we can have just a rough idea of what size to make. So these are coming in at 24 and 7/8 in terms of the total height. And then the width is 15 inches. So if you wanted to do full bleed, you would just add 1/4 of an inch or maybe even 1/2 of an inch around the edge of those measurements. Always check yours, of course, because manufacturing does have small variations up to 1/2 an inch on products like this. In terms of what I'm going to do today, I'm thinking that a design that's about 11.5 to 12 inches is going to be pretty good for width-wise. And I'll just kind of aim for the height to fit. I think most of my golf designs are square or close to square. So yeah, I feel like that's going to be a good size. So we're going to go with about an 11.5 inch width, maybe 12. We'll kind of see how we feel about it and go from there. So let's set that up in Affinity Designer.
We are working in Affinity Designer on a Windows PC today. You may notice that my interface looks a little bit different than yours, and that's simply because I have tailored the layout to what works best for me. Be sure to check out our 10-minute Basics for Beginners series on Affinity Designer if you are new to the software to help you get more familiar. If you're using the Mac version, you may notice some small differences in your studio layout, but all of the same options that we will follow today should still be there. We're going to be setting up our print document, and the first step is to open up a document in the size of the page we are going to be printing on and the orientation that will be printed with our printer. You will do this by coming to File and then New or New Document and entering in the measurements or selecting from presets. Based on the measurements that we got for our golf or sport towel, we're looking to have our design be somewhere between 11 and 12 inches wide. Now, we had about 25 inches of the total height on that golf towel, which means we could really have our design 15, 18, even 20 inches if we wanted. Now, I'm thinking that the design I'm going to use today is probably going to be around 15 inches tall if I have it at about 11 inches wide. So I'm basing my initial document setup on that. For most of you who have printers that can print tabloid size, which would be the 11 by 17, or Super B paper, which is a 13 by 19, you're going to want to choose one of those two options. I'm using my Epson SureColor F570 Pro from Johnson's Plastics Plus, and that has rolled paper options that are 17 inches and also 24 inches. I currently have the 17-inch paper loaded, which is perfect for this kind of project. I actually only buy letter size paper for my SureColor F570 Pro because it just makes sense to use the rolled paper for pretty much everything else, which really alleviates the need of having to buy a bunch of different papers and have them on hand. So you can choose from the presets that are available to you, or you can enter those measurements in manually underneath the Layout tab. Be sure to double check your document units via that little drop down menu and change them as necessary. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be using my rolled paper, which is 17 inches wide. And because we're going for 11 or 11 and a half inches wide about for our design, I can just do this 12-inch option that I have. This is just a preset that I created for myself. You want to make sure that your DPI is set to 300. And underneath the color tab, your color format should be set to RGB/8 for sublimation printing, no matter what kind of printer you're using. And your color profile should be sRGB IEC 61966-2.1. Now, if you are having some color discrepancy issues and you're using an older Mac computer, then you may need to adjust your color profile to the Adobe RGB 1998. This is an older profile that tends to work better with Macs. Now again, this is a Mac specific issue. Macs are known to have some color output issues with specialty printers. That's the reason why we always mention it. Your color profile here is not the same as your ICC profile for your printer, so do not select that in this settings. For the most part, these settings are meant to be universal no matter what type of sublimation printer you are using. When you have your document set up, you're going to click Create, and just to reiterate, you want to make sure that your document is the size of the page you are printing and the orientation your printer will print. So if you have a printer that prints with Super B paper or 11 by 17, then you are going to have it be portrait because that is how your printer feeds the paper. If you are using the 17-inch rolled paper with the Epson SureColor F570 Pro like I am, then it's going to be landscape. So once everything is set, go ahead and click on Create. Next, we're going to import our design that we intend to print. You can do this by selecting the Place tool, which is this little picture icon in your Tools panel on the left side of the screen, or by coming to File and then Place. This is going to open up your File Explorer, in which case we're going to use this Eat, Sleep, Golf, Repeat design. When you see the little downward arrow with the portal, that means that your design is ready to import. You can do one click and it will import at full size, or you can click and drag your cursor, and that will allow you to control the size it imports in. I'm going to pop over to my transform panel and just have a look here. And it is showing that I'm at a width of 12 inches, height of 12 inches. But there's a little bit of dead space here. As you can see, we've got some dead space on this side of the text and on this side with the golf ball. So I want to kind of have this sized as big as I might want it, which currently is at that 12 inches by 12 inches. And then I'm going to right click and rasterize. Now you do want to make sure that you have already sized your PNG layer to as big as you might want it, because once you hit that rasterize option, it's going to lock in this 300 DPI as the rasterization amount. You can see right up here on my design that at this size it's currently at 416 DPI, and that's because all of the designs that I create and sell in my shop, I make sure that they are larger so that they are able to fit on a variety of substrates. Originally, I designed this for a shirt, and with that in mind, I thought it could easily be 15 to 18 inches wide if it was going on a bigger shirt or on the back of a bigger shirt, or maybe even like a sweatshirt or a jacket. So I always make my designs a little bit bigger so that there's lots of room for scaling them accordingly. But once you hit that rasterize button, you are going to lock in this size at 300 dpi. So make sure that you have sized everything accordingly beforehand. So as I said, you're going to right click, select rasterize, and that's going to go ahead and eliminate all of that negative space. It's just a quick, easy step. So now when we look over at this, we can see that my width is at 10.5 inches, 10.6 inches. We do want it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and lock that aspect ratio so that the width and height will proportionately resize. You can do that by just clicking on the middle there. You're either going to see a figure 8/infinity symbol if you're using Affinity Designer 1.0, or you're going to see this little chain link when you are using Affinity Designer 2.0. Both versions, when it's locked, have these little arms. See, no arms, arms, you want to see the little arms. So I'm going to go to that width because the width is the most important measurement. So I'm going to start with that one and I'm going to put in 11.5. So that gives me about 12 and 5/8 inch, well, 12, a little bit more in terms of the height, which will be fine. I think that'll work great on my golf towel. I could do maybe 11 3/4. I think 12 inches might be a little bit too much, but I'm going to stick with this 11.5 because I'm pretty happy with that. So we can see that this is currently off of my document space, which is a problem. So we're just going to rotate it. I can do that by coming up to our rotation tools and choosing either rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. And then I'll go ahead and just center that on my page. I always prefer to center my designs no matter what. I just think that it's makes it easier when you're trying to trim your pages and ensures that you are not like over in certain areas that it might not print or it might get cut off. If I wanted to print two of these, I could do them side by side on 24-inch paper that was approximately 13 inches tall. That would be another option if I was going to go ahead and do more than one of these. So now that we have everything set, we can send this to print. But before I do just want to remind you, if you are new, that if you don't see these little snapping guides, I love using them. They are activated by selecting this little magnet icon. Alternatively, you can find all of your alignment tools where you see this little bar graph symbol, and you can easily select spacing and select alignment and click apply. When we're ready to send our file to print, we come to File, Print, and this is going to open up your printer display box. You're going to select your printer from the drop-down menu, and then you are going to select Properties. Now, if you are using a converted sublimation printer, this is where you will set your ICC profile, any color correction settings that you have, paper type settings, anything of that nature. When you have a converted sublimation printer, you likely have a variety of settings that you are using, and it is best to save those settings just to make it a little bit easier when you go to print. You can save those as a preset within your printer properties dialog box. For those who are using the Epson SureColor F570 Pro, there's nothing to do. Your document is already set up. The only thing you have to do is double check your paper size, make sure everything is selected accordingly. I do have my document size set at this 12 inches by 17 inches. I have a preset for that, and it is outputting at the same size. If I didn't have the correct one, I could just come to settings and I could choose any of the presets that I've created. One thing you always want to double check for is that this little picture here looks like the orientation that your paper is going to be feeding. Always double check that because sometimes it rotates itself just because of how the printer reads the measurements. Next, you're going to come to that source. I'm using rolled paper, but again, if you were using 11 by 17 sheet of paper or 13 by 19, you could choose your auto sheet feeder. When you're using rolled paper, you do need to select the width. We have the 17 inch and I also have the 24 inch on hand. Both of them are in here. For our media type, we have the drop down, which will let us choose between textile and rigid. We're doing textile today since this is our golf towel, but you can switch between those. And don't forget that if you do have the Epson SureColor F570 Pro, you will need to adjust your media if the settings are not the same. So if your printer is set up for rigid and you're printing textile, you're just going to adjust that really quick on your computer screen. Your design should be mirrored. It is mirrored by default with this particular printer, but again, if you are using a converted sublimation printer, then you want to make sure that you mirror that image so that it prints correctly. So once you've double checked all of your settings and you're ready to go, you can click OK and then OK again to send it off to print.
Once your transfer is done printing, you want to go ahead and trim it up. And we're going to pre-press this because it's a textile. You always want to pre-press textiles to get out any moisture that's in the fabric. If you don't pre-press, it will shrink when that moisture is pushed out due to the heat from your heat press, and that'll end up giving you ghosting. It's the top cause of ghosting. Before you pre-press, always lint roll. And we don't need to pre-press the whole thing because our design is not covering the whole thing, but you may want to pre-press the whole thing if you end up with lines that kind of bother you. They typically come out in the wash, so it's not really a big deal on something like this, but with items like t-shirts, you always want to shake them out really good. So the rule for pre-pressing is to do half the time of your full press when you would actually do the design. If you are in a more humid climate or it's a more humid time of year, do the full time. So for this particular item, we're doing 385 degrees for 60 seconds when we press our design. So we're going to do 30 seconds for this print. Our humidity is pretty low right now. It's 40% in my office. That's not considered high humidity, especially not here in North Carolina. So we're going to slide that on back. And as I said, we're doing 385 for about 30 seconds. Sport towels like this are a really fun item to offer all year round. While I'm doing this one as a golf theme, you can technically do this for really any kind of sport. All right, I always like to give things another lint roll after doing that pre-press and also after pressing, just because it helps revive the texture some. You can see that we have a little bit of a line from our press because this is a fluffier kind of weave. So this just helps kind of even that out. All right. So once you are satisfied there, make sure we're nice and smooth. We're going to go ahead and line up our design. Now I do have this upside down. The grommet's on the other end. So we're going to make sure that we put our design the correct direction. Now you can always eyeball something like this, especially when it has nice straight edges. It's a little bit easier. I recommend cutting your designs as close to the edge as possible. That way you have good visibility for what's straight. And when all else fails, you can use a laser level or a t-shirt ruler. My laser level is on loan, but I do have a t-shirt ruler. You can see mine's from JC's Blanks here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And this is just such a handy tool to make sure you've got things centered and also make sure that they are straight. Okay, I think that we are looking pretty good. Just double check from the side here. Fantastic. We're gonna put a piece of blowout paper on there. I always recommend blowout paper, even if you are using thicker sublimation paper. It's just better to be safe than sorry. If your press is running hot, you can still get bleed out with thicker sublimation paper. So just something to keep in mind, always use blowout paper. We are doing 385 degrees for 60 seconds with medium pressure. So you can see mine's right at about a 5. If you are doing this with a press that doesn't have any kind of digital pressure gauge, you're looking for this to have a little bit of resistance. Not too much resistance. It shouldn't be difficult to close this, but just enough that you've got good pressure. These items are great on their own. I recommend selling them in sets of 2. That's kind of my preferred to go about it. Unless you're selling them in bulk, then you could do sets of 1. They don't come with like a bag that they're sealed in, but that's a good way to present them if you're selling them in more of a wholesale purpose. You can put them in like those cellophane t-shirt bag things, and that just looks a little bit better when they are on display and keeps them from getting lint and anything else on them. Bring that on down so you guys can see. Anytime I'm removing something off of a textile item, I always like to just put my finger down to hold it and then lift it up in one foul swoop. That will prevent you from accidentally shifting it while it's still hot and getting some type of ghosting, which is another way ghosting happens. We're next going to give this a nice good lint roll. I know some people get really concerned about lines in microfiber specifically, but stuff that's plush like this, when it gets washed, it does release those lines pretty well. It's a little bit different than the sublimation items that are like cotton-like because they're so much thinner. These nice thick ones, they tend to be pretty resilient. All right, and if I can move you guys up just a little bit so you can see better. There is our finished golf towel. So these are great for all year round. They're great for marketing as an item for different types of events, good promotional product. They're really high quality, highly recommend, definitely some of the nicest ones I've seen. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to download the Sub That Learning Library app, and we'll see you next time.